If you had no tops of HIV, you'd have no bottoms of HIV.
Oh, no you wouldn't.
They're not passing it on ass to ass.
Alright. Hi guys, this is Caden and welcome to episode 6 of the diaries behind how to stay positive when you test positive. If you're new to this series, let me just explain what How to Stay Positive When You Test Positive is. It's a project focused on aiding life with HIV, complete toolbox of information following a diagnosis. In the meantime, I asked some of the wonderful people who agreed to be part of this project to meet me for a chat about issues that surround HIV, and today we're going to be talking to Tom Hayes, who's an HIV advocate, about HIV myths.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm alright, thank you for having me. I've been taking a bit of a break recently actually. I've been on holiday, I've got engaged, I bought a dog, so having some personal life. When I was first diagnosed with HIV, I was working in an IT company. I was good at it, but I didn't really enjoy it, and I didn't really feel like I was helping anybody. So to help me cope with my own diagnosis, I wrote an anonymous diary, a blog about my life with HIV.
You can find it in the description below.
And then from there, that rolled into some magazine and newspaper columns. And from that, it went into some TV and radio work. And now I freelance doing HIV advocacy, activism, and treatment training for various charities around the UK.
Incredible. So I think a lot of you are familiar with the term UequalsU. Very straightforward, but maybe hard to explain to people who you know are most likely to be quite resistant to receiving that message.
The simple fact is that if you take treatment, it will keep the virus under control. It's no longer in your sexual fluids, meaning you can't pass it on no matter how many times you fuck somebody without a condom. And they're not going to get HIV. That is the message, that's the crux of the message. It's just how we explain that to a way that every single person on the planet can understand.
Has there been any cases of someone transmitting HIV?
No, there have been no recorded cases. We have so much data to back it up. We've got partner 1, partner 2, opposites attracts, HPTN052, with literally hundreds of thousands of documented cases of condomless anal and vaginal sex with 0 linked infections from partner to partner.
The links to some of those studies you can find in the description below if you want to read about them a little bit more. And what's really important about this, and I want to emphasize this, is that this also applies to condomless sex. And I feel like that message gets lost because of the fear of not delivering prevention messages. It gets lost and it takes away from UequalsU.
A lot of medical professionals I've come across are reluctant to discuss UequalsU with patients because they don't want them going off and having condomless sex. But by denying them that information, by denying people that knowledge that undetectable equals untransmittable, you're stopping them having one of the pieces of the sexual health jigsaw. You're stopping them enjoying a full and normal sex life.
And you're peddling a lifetime of mental health complications.
You're just reinforcing the fear and stigma around HIV.
Precisely. Oh.
Oh.
Yes.
Moist.
Okay, let's talk HIV myths. Alright. Myth number 1. You would know from symptoms that you have HIV.
The most common symptom of a HIV infection is a flu-like situation. So you might have a sore throat, you might have a chest infection, you might have a cough or a headache.
Sounds really vague.
Very easy to miss. A lot of people miss their seroconversion because they think they've just got a cold or a flu. And a lot of other people, myself included, about a third of people, never have any symptoms. Symptoms can be useful for working out that you're not well, but they're certainly not reliable for helping you diagnose HIV.
So get tested. Myth number 2. You can't get HIV if you top.
If you had no tops of HIV, you'd have no bottoms of HIV.
Oh, no you wouldn't.
They're not passing it on ass to ass.
But then not everyone is just top or just bottom, so
No.
maybe they got fucked and then transmitted it by topping someone else.
No. You can absolutely get HIV through topping. Your risk is admittedly a little bit lower than bottoming, but it's still a massive risk for HIV. Same applies to straight men.
Right, and there's a difference between being cut and uncut.
Yeah, so if you have a cut dick, obviously there's less surface area because you haven't got the foreskin and the skin hardens, so
Right.
it's harder for the virus to get through.
It becomes actual skin, right?
Yeah,
Like
but again,
surface.
also that's not 100% protection in any
Right.
way, shape or form.
Skin also breaks sometimes. I don't know if you've ever had your banjo string
Oh,
snapped. It happened to me 3 times. It looks different than it used to. I don't know if any of you noticed, but yeah.
The discerning public.
And you know, HIV could have actually gotten. Probably not me, because I mean, I had a really good time in the back. Myth number 3: you have to wait weeks for your HIV results.
Modern HIV testing can be done in little as a minute. If you go to your local NHS clinic, it might take 7 days because they buy the kits in bulk and it takes longer to process, just to save us money on the NHS. But you can walk down to your local pharmacy and buy a self-testing kit or get one online, and you can get results at home in a minute.
Myth number 4: if you catch HIV, you can't have sex again.
I'm pretty sure I saw you having sex on Twitter like a couple of days ago.
But I'm HIV negative.
Again, wrong, you know.
Again, wrong. You don't know me.
HIV positive people are just as entitled and able to have sex as anybody else in the world. Even if you do have, a detectable viral load, you can still date HIV positive people. You can still use condoms. You know, there are so many options for you out there, and everybody is entitled to have sex.
Yeah.
Have a healthy sex life, regardless of your HIV status.
Myth number 5: if you have HIV, your kids will have HIV. Tom?
No, not necessarily. If you were diagnosed before you conceived your kid and you're on treatment and the mother is on treatment, the kid is going to be HIV negative. That does not apply to breastfeeding, unfortunately. UequalsU does not apply to breastfeeding.
That's a great point.
So that's something to be aware of. But yeah, you can totally have a family of HIV negative.
A fat baby.
You can totally have a family if you're HIV positive, and your kids will be HIV negative.
Myth number 6: if you have HIV, you won't live long.
No. We're going to be around for a while, I'm afraid. So for a while we thought if you were diagnosed, you'd have about 20-30 years life. Which is obviously a massive improvement from the 80s, where people were expected to have 2 to 6 months of life.
I mean, absolutely, in the 80s people were just like dropping like flies.
But we've got so much data of the millions of people around the world living with HIV now that if you're diagnosed in your 20s and you start treatment immediately, you can expect to live just as long as anybody else.
Myth number 7: if you have HIV, you can't go on treatment until you're very sick.
So this has changed recently. The UK used to withhold treatment until your CD4 count, so your immune system, dropped to 350.
Why? Why did they do that?
Because it was cheaper.
This meant that people literally had a high viral load and continued to potentially put their partners at risk.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd decision. But now in the light of UequalsU, we now know that it saves so much money in the long run to have everybody who can be undetectable, so it can't be passed on, so you have fewer people in the future with HIV.
Myth number 8: if you have HIV, you can't travel or work abroad.
There are a few places in the world where that is true, so the Arab Emirate, Saudi Arabia, Korea, Russia. But for the most part, no. You can travel and work across the EU, America, Canada, Australia. Some countries for perhaps only a few months. You might not be able to settle there permanently, unfortunately. But for the most part, you can travel wherever you want and do whatever you want. One of the most surprising holdouts, unfortunately, is Canada. So Canada, you can go there. You can stay for, I think it's 120 days. You can have a temporary work visa, but you can't settle there if you have HIV, unless
Canada, get your fucking shit together.
Unless you have a shit ton of money in the bank and you sign a document saying you will pay for your healthcare out of your own pocket to cover the HIV.
Oh, so it's because of the expense.
Yeah.
Information about travel with HIV you can find in the description below.
On the flip side though, if you come to the UK as a migrant or asylum seeker, you are eligible for free HIV treatment. I think that's really important. It's good
for the global epidemic.
For the public health, but also for that person. They've come to a country they don't know, they have no money, they're fleeing a horrible situation in their own country, and then we turn them away from life-saving medication. No. Despite some right-wing politicians in the UK, we still offer free testing and HIV treatment for anyone regardless of where they're from in the world.
Myth number 9: if you have HIV, you can't get a mortgage or insurance.
So there's some truth to this. For the longest time you couldn't get a mortgage, and you are still excluded from some insurance policies. Not most of them anymore. I think most modern insurers are much more open. They know now the science behind HIV, that people living with HIV are just as healthy and live just as long, which was the biggest factor for not offering mortgages insurance. So you were going to die soon and you wouldn't pay off your debt. But it has been an issue for the longest time, and I think a lot of people with HIV have a distrust of the finance sector because of that. And also a lot of people I talk to don't want to test for HIV because if I know, then it's going to invalidate my mortgage or my insurance or something.
And that's when you're not going to live long, probably, and you're not going to be able to pay a mortgage off. Isn't that?
But there are some trailblazing companies, like, can I name drop?
You can?
Like, so Emerald Life, it's an LGBT insurance company, and they have pushed so hard for people living with HIV to the point where if you're undetectable, you no longer have to disclose on any of their policies.
Right.
Because they don't care.
This is quite recent, isn't
it?
Yeah,
last year I think.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be. But there is some truth to that myth, but it's getting less and less every day.
Great. The link to Emerald Life you can find in the description below. Myth number 10. You can tell if someone has HIV.
I mean, if they tell you. Otherwise, I can't see how you'd know.
Let's break this down.
Okay. I think there is a stereotype of what a person with HIV looks like, and it's usually a white gay man with fat and muscle wastage. Right. And that's obviously a hangover from a very real and very traumatic point in our history of the late 80s and early 90s, where treatment wasn't readily available, and people did have horrible side effects and have to be horribly ill and die quite quickly. But that's not now. That's not 2019. You know, if you've got HIV and you go on treatment, you will stay as fit and healthy as you want to be for as long as you want to be. You know, I put on a bit of weight, but that's down to the amount of wine I consume. That's nothing to do with my HIV.
Speaking of piling on mass, I think the AIDS epidemic is directly linked to the fact that the steroid use in our community is 5 times higher than the straight community.
Yeah.
Isn't that something? Myth number 11. If you forget your medication, you immediately become transmittable and you can pass on HIV.
HIV medication has got quite a long half-life. So the drugs will stick around in your body for maybe 24, 36, 48, even some of the other ones, 72 hours. So everybody misses a dose.
Definitely
whatever and it's not just HIV positive people. If you speak to anyone who's watched this who's taken antibiotics has missed a dose or had a dose late, you know, we're only human. People who take antibiotics miss a dose, and they're taking it for a week, 2 weeks. We have to take this every day for the rest of our lives. So missing a dose is normal, and no, you won't become detectable in that day.
I've had a spike. I had a spike, and I was quite terrified by it. Although I was assured by my doctor that it's okay. It went from undetectable to like 160.
That's still
146.
Fine. That's still undetectable.
That's the old undetectable, isn't it?
That's the old undetectable. Yeah. So the studies that we base UequalsU on used a viral load of 200. So if it's your viral load blip or spike is below 200, you're still undetectable.
Myth number 12. If you change your treatment, you can't go back to the old one.
If you are changing because of side effects perhaps, or a lifestyle reason, and you've treated the drugs in the past with respect, there's no reason you can't go back to your old drugs. If you are moving because you develop resistance to your old drug, no, you might not be able to go back because it won't be effective. But there's always another option for you, I think, out there. I've changed treatment 4 times now, and it took me a while to find one that was right for me. But you know, I'm there now.
Why did you change it?
Because so the first one, I had some pretty nasty side effects. I had insomnia, migraines, and hallucinations.
Which one was it?
That was that was the infamous atripla, which isn't really prescribed that much anymore because it's quite an old drug. And then I've changed 3 times since then. I'm now on a 1 pill once a day, and it has almost no side effects as far as I can tell. But it's taken me a while to get it and tune it. And I think a lot of people with HIV will find the same.
Myth number 13. HIV treatment comes with lots of horrible side effects.
There's some truth to this one. The older HIV medications certainly had a lot of side effects. Back in the late 80s, the first one, AZT, That was the first approved HIV treatment. That's basically chemotherapy, so you can imagine the side effects of chemotherapy. And over the years, we've got new drugs, and they become more and more refined and less toxic. They're still very powerful drugs. So I had a lot of side effects with my first medication, but I've switched a few times since then, and I'm on something that has no side effects. And yes, for the first few weeks, you might have some unpleasantness. You might have a dodgy tummy or feel a bit dizzy while your body gets used to the medication. But for most people in 2019, there are so many modern options out there that nobody should be on an old drug that has side effects or anything.
I have asked for a change of medication, and it's happened once, but I've actually had to move clinics for that because they wouldn't change my medication. And I had diarrhea for like 3 years.
That's awful.
On ritonavir and darunavir, and now I'm on Truvada and raltegravir, and I don't have the side effects that I used to have.
There are so many different combinations, so many different drugs that make up those combinations. A decent doctor, a decent pharmacist can tailor something to your needs.
Myth number 14, you can cure HIV.
There have been a few people that have been cured, so the Berlin patient and recently the London patient, but they were cured through having multiple cancers and whole body irradiation and stem cell transplants. But no, there's no cure for HIV. We're working on it, I'm sure. Lots of companies are working on it, along with vaccines. But at the moment, for most people, it's 1 or 2 pills a day, and it makes you undetectable, which you can't pass it on, and it keeps you healthy, and you can have babies, and you can do any job. So that's pretty close to a cure, I think, didn't you?
It is, although because there's no cure, I think that HIV stigma prevails so badly.
Yeah, so if only we had a pill for the stigma, along with a pill for the HIV.
I feel like this is the pill for the stigma.
What, your beautiful face?
That, and also your beautiful face. Yeah. And the very hopeful words that you're saying. Okay, enough of those pleasantries. I'm feeling quite nauseous. Myth number 15. An HIV-negative test result means you are HIV-negative.
So like all HIV tests, we don't actually test for the virus itself. We test for 2 things. The antibody, which is your body's response to the virus, and the antigens, which is a protein that the virus makes. And it takes time for those to build up in your body. So we say the tests are about 95% accurate at around 4 weeks and 99-point-something% accurate at 12 weeks. So you can be relatively certain that if you test today, you were HIV negative 4 weeks ago.
A month ago.
People get confused about it. So I tested negative, therefore I can go and do whatever I want.
Or I've had a really busy weekend, and so I'm going to go to the clinic on Monday and get my accurate HIV test result.
Wrong.
And should you test positive, that's also okay.
There's loads of support out there. You can contact someone like THT Direct and find out where your local HIV clinical support group is.
Sweet.
Whatever the result is, it's a good result. Now that might sound weird initially, but if you're HIV negative, that's a great result, and you can take steps to stay negative. And if you turn out to be HIV positive from test, that's a good result as well, because you now know that you're HIV positive, and you can go and start life-saving treatment and become undetectable, and live just as long and fuck just as many people. The only bad result is not knowing your HIV status.
HIV isn't that scary.
Not once you take it.
Right. This takes us to Karen.
Hello,
Karen. For those of you who are just joining us, this is where it started.
Like, I don't want a straight, white, heterosexual woman who's sitting in an office in a public health building somewhere
Fuck off,
saying, why can't gay men just wear condoms? Bye, Karen.
So that's one way to interpret Karen, but Karen doesn't have to be straight, cis, white. She certainly doesn't have to be a woman. I used to be a Karen. I used to also have these old-fashioned, ineffective ways of talking about sexual health and interpreting sexual health. I think there's a lot of opportunity for improvement. If you have a request to Karen, she's listening now.
Hi, Commissioner Karen. I know money in the NHS and public services is really tight at the moment, but HIV support is really important. Regardless of when people are diagnosed, whether it's 1999 or 2019, we still need support. And I've seen you in meetings, and you've said we just need people with HIV to take their pills and get on with it. But life isn't that simple, and some of us need a little more support. So please think about recommissioning HIV support organisations, because they're so important.
Bye, Karen! Are you on social media?
I am. You can find me on everything as Positive Lad.
Okay, excellent. The links are in the description below. So that's it for episode 6 of the Diaries Behind How to Stay Positive When You Test Positive. I cannot wait to share the final product with you in autumn. The next episode will be with you next month. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, please share it with your friends, and
Subscribe.
make sure you subscribe, yes, and turn on your notifications, because if you don't, YouTube just won't tell you that I've posted a new video.
Ring Craven's bell.
That's it. Ring my bell.
Ring your bell.
Ring my bell. Myth number, was it 4 or 5?
4.
Myth number 7.
8.
If you have... Ready? Myth number 8.
9.
9. Fuck you. Fuck you, Tom. Fuck
Fuck you,
you.
Caden.
So myth number 11.
You did good at counting there.
Thank you. You learn from the fucking best. And this is gonna be 12?
13.